Ellie Harper comes home from the clinic to find a neon pink violation notice flapping under her wiper blade, taped to her late father's rust-covered pickup truck. The wind tugged at her scrubs as she stepped out of her silver Toyota, plastic grocery bag rustling at her side. Across the driveway, the truck sat motionless beneath the dappled shade of the red maple. Its rusted body, once navy blue, bore decades of weather and memory. The pink slip fluttered like a tongue stuck out in mockery. She approached slowly, her sneakers crunching on the gravel. The paper was taped just above the inspection sticker, bold letters scrawled in black ink, Notice of Violation, Article 7B, Environmentally Degrading Vehicle. She blinked, rereading the phrase. A hand-drawn arrow pointed to a checkbox beside Structurally Unsound. Another note beneath it added, in smaller writing, This vehicle must be removed within 72 hours. A tired breath escaped her. She didn't slam the door or toss the slip. She simply folded it in half and tucked it into her back pocket, glancing at the sagging front porch, the tiny flag fluttering beside the railing, and the slight tilt of the porch swing. Her father had parked that truck there every spring since 1992. Inside, she set the groceries down, sliced turkey, rye bread, peach preserves, and washed her hands under lukewarm tap water. A piece of paint flaked off the sink's edge. The quiet of the house wrapped around her shoulders. Then she turned on her heel and walked across the street. Gwen Peterson's porch already smelled of lemon-scented furniture polish and gardenia. The older woman sat rocking gently, a pitcher of sweet tea resting on a tray beside her. She waved without standing. Saw the notice, Gwen said, her voice like soft denim. Pink this time. They've gotten bolder. Ellie managed a smile. You've got a collection of these, right? Gwen chuckled, nodding toward a 3-ring binder nestled between potted begonias. Under Battle of the Bougainvillea, you'll find the time they find me for planting flowers 2 inches outside the designated mulch border. Ellie sat on the edge of a wicker stool and accepted a sweating glass of tea. The sugar was stronger than she liked, but it tasted of long summers and front yard gossip. They called it structurally unsound. Oh honey, Gwen scoffed, that truck's got more steel than Rhonda's SUV and twice the backbone. Ellie smiled softly. He always said it'd outlive us all. Ellie, cup of diner coffee in hand, stares at the fine print of the HOA bylaws on her laptop while Country Roads plays from the radio. The screen's glow cast faint shadows across the Formica table at the back corner booth of the Porchlight Diner. Outside, the wind swirled soft dust across Main Street, brushing against potted petunias and the aluminum benches lining the sidewalk. Ellie scrolled slowly through the PDF, her brow furrowing as she squinted at legal phrasing that sounded like it belonged in a courtroom, not a cul-de-sac. Beside her, Gwen stirred half and half into her coffee with the kind of meticulous care reserved for habits decades in the making. You know, Gwen said, voice lilting above the music, in '94, they made poor Mrs. Dorsey remove her concrete bird bath. Called it too whimsical for community standards. Ellie raised her eyes, lips curling faintly. A bird bath. Had painted ducks and everything. HOA said it made the lawn look unserious. Gwen sipped. Next year they fined her for wind chimes. Ellie closed the laptop softly. I went to town hall this morning. Asked about appealing the notice. Gwen glanced over the rim of her mug. And? Mr. Dobbins said, and I quote, the HOA runs its own kingdom. We just keep the maps updated. She exhaled slowly. So I'm appealing to someone else. At the counter, a young man leaned on one elbow while waiting for his takeout. His mechanic's jacket read Billy in white thread. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the word HOA had a way of making people perk up. He turned slightly, a grin teasing the edge of his mouth. Hope I'm not interrupting, but if that truck's the one with the purple heart plate parked off Magnolia Lane, it's a hell of a rig. Bit of rust, sure, but it's got more history than most of these town signs. Ellie blinked, surprised. It was my dad's. Billy extended a hand across the table. Billy Tran. I live with my grandma on Willow Drive. Grew up down the street from Mr. Harper. Used to watch him wash that truck every Memorial Day. Ellie shook his hand. Ellie. And thanks. He rubbed the back of his neck. Look, I work part-time at Joe's garage. I've got some cleaner and polish in the back of my truck. We could buff out some of the rust, make it look less like a target. Not that you should have to. Gwen tapped her mug. Your grandma still hanging her flag on the 20th? Yep, Billy chuckled. Got fined $10 last year. Rhonda called it seasonal aggression. Later that afternoon, Ellie's driveway buzzed gently with activity. Billy wore a pair of weathered gloves and crouched beside the truck, carefully scrubbing at the wheel wells. Ellie stood behind him with a cloth, wiping down the hood. The sun cast long, forgiving shadows, and for a moment, it felt like any other Saturday spring cleaning day. They took pictures, one of the plate, one from each angle, one with the folded napkin still visible inside the dashboard. Billy leaned over and checked the lighting. Looks good. Plate's still readable. That's what matters. Inside the garage, Ellie opened her laptop and crafted a short, polite email. To veteranaffairs@arkansas.gov. Subject, Vehicle Plate PH 7642, Inquiry regarding historic status. Dear Sir/Madam. I'm writing to inquire whether the vehicle registered with Purple Heart Plate PH 7642, belonging to the late James Harper, U.S. Army, may be exempt from HOA regulation under historic or veteran designation. Photos attached. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Ellie Harper. She clicked send. Outside, Gwen arrived with a foil-covered pan balanced in her arms. Ellie lifted the edge, cherry cobbler, still warm. Brought you something to keep your thinking sweet, Gwen said with a wink. They sat on the porch with plastic forks and paper plates. Billy leaned against the truck, grease on his cheek, cobbler in hand. Your dad used to eat this right before the parade, Gwen mused. Always said it gave him enough sugar to survive speeches from the mayor. Ellie smiled, the taste sharp and nostalgic. Later that evening, Ellie refreshed her inbox one last time before bed. One unread message blinked at the top. From, arcgov-office@state.ar.us. Subject, Vehicle Plate PH 7642, Inquiry received. Message, Inquiry forwarded to Office of the Governor. You will be contacted. She receives an automated reply, Inquiry forwarded to Office of the Governor. You will be contacted. An email from the Governor's office arrives at dawn with a bold subject line, Need clarification, Plate PH 7642. Ellie read it twice before the words registered. The coffee hadn't even finished brewing yet. Light filtered dimly through the lace curtain over the sink as she clicked the message open, her fingers hovering on the trackpad. Miss Harper, we are reviewing Veteran Plate PH 7642. Could you provide verification of ownership and service record? Please call the Governor's office at your earliest convenience. The timestamp read 5:42 a.m. Steam rose from the coffee pot. Ellie reached for her phone with one hand while pulling down a box from the top of the fridge with the other. Inside were folders labeled in her father's handwriting, VA forms, discharge papers, parade routes. She selected one labeled 86 Parade, Fort Smith, service copy. The aide who answered her call sounded surprisingly human for the early hour. Governor's office. This is Maya. Hi, yes, I received an email about Purple Heart Plate PH 7642. It belonged to my father, James Harper. Maya didn't hesitate. Can you confirm whether the vehicle is still in your possession and whether he served in active combat? Yes to both, Ellie said, voice steady. I have his discharge papers and veteran designation. And the vehicle has been in our driveway since he passed. It hasn't been altered. Do you have supporting documentation? Images, plate photos? I do. I'll send them now. By 7:30, Ellie stood in Billy's garage, arms folded as he scanned yellowed photographs. A curled Polaroid of James Harper in full dress uniform, saluting from behind the wheel, lay under the scanner's light. This one's good, Billy murmured. Back says 1986, Memorial Day, Fort Smith. Handwritten. I remember that day. He made me hold his hat while he adjusted the mirror. Billy smiled faintly and adjusted the contrast. I'll clean it up before we send it. He gathered several documents and slid them into a shared folder. Footlocker stuff too? Yes. The one marked Platoon B, 1983. And maybe include the email from the Veterans Affairs Office forwarding it up. Back at her house, Ellie compiled it all into a single message and hit send. Hours passed. By mid-afternoon, word had spread. The HOA bulletin board had a new notice thumbtacked at an angle. Special meeting, HOA board, Community Hall, 6 p.m. Topic: Homeowner Vehicle Regulations and External Interference. Rhonda's name was scrawled in red marker across the bottom. Ellie arrived early. Gwen was already there, seated near the front, knitting something bright yellow with large wooden needles. Billy slouched against the back wall beside the snack table, sipping from a plastic cup. The community hall buzzed with low conversation and the scent of lemon floor polish. Rhonda entered briskly at 5:58, lips pursed, heels clicking. Her blouse was starched within an inch of its life. Mildred Hall trailed behind, notebook clutched to her chest. We'll begin shortly, Rhonda said, tapping the microphone. This meeting has been called to address concerns regarding vehicle compliance and misunderstandings with state departments. Ellie raised her hand. Rhonda ignored her. But first, the HOA president continued, let me reassure all present that our regulations are designed to preserve neighborhood value and harmony, not to antagonize. A few heads nodded. Gwen kept knitting. Ellie stood. I've received written acknowledgement from the governor's office requesting confirmation of my father's Purple Heart status and vehicle designation. I've submitted verified documents. Rhonda's smile tightened. That's all very touching. But this isn't a political matter. It's a neighborhood matter. It's also a federal designation, Ellie said, voice level. She stepped forward and handed copies of her email exchange to Mildred. There are laws about veteran plates and historic vehicles. HOA regulations don't supersede state law. Someone near the back muttered, she's right. Rhonda's jaw moved as if chewing on a lemon seed. We'll take this under advisement, she said, voice flat. Meeting adjourned 20 minutes later, with more muttering than applause. Outside, Billy jingled his keys. Need a lift? Ellie shook her head. Thanks. I need to walk some of this off. He grinned. Offer stands. The Camaro's finally running smooth. On her way home, Ellie paused at the intersection before her driveway. The breeze had picked up, azalea petals skittered across the asphalt. Then headlights appeared down the block, sleek and dark. A black SUV with tinted windows and government plates rolled slowly past her house. That evening, a black SUV with government plates slows in front of Ellie's driveway. At 6:45 a.m., Ellie hears the unmistakable rattle of a tow truck pulling up to her curb. The sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, metal shifting over gravel, the click of hydraulic brakes engaging, a muffled cough of the diesel engine. Ellie shot upright from her breakfast table, toast untouched, coffee half cold in its mug. She moved fast, slipping into her sneakers and grabbing the manila folder she'd left by the front door. Out on the porch, the air was thick with early May humidity, clinging to her skin like invisible gauze. The truck sat angled just past her mailbox, its long flatbed tilted ever so slightly. A man in a safety vest, mid-40s with sun-leathered skin, unhooked a winch. Morning, Ellie called calmly. He glanced up. Ma'am. HOA requested removal of the vehicle. Said it's non-compliant. Ellie stepped down the front steps, holding out the letter. Before you do anything, you might want to read this. It's from the governor's legal aid. The vehicle is protected under Arkansas Code 27-24-201, and this, she tapped the paper, is a Purple Heart plate. The driver, whose jacket read Rick, took the page and read. His brow furrowed. From behind them, heels clacked down the sidewalk. Rhonda Kingsley arrived in full makeup and a collared magenta shirt, her HOA badge clipped to her belt like a sheriff's star. "Mr. Dawson," she called, addressing Rick. "You don't need to read that. It's irrelevant. We operate under private community standards, not state suggestions." Rick held up a hand. "My brother served in Iraq. Got shrapnel in his leg from a roadside bomb. He doesn't like suggestions either, but he loves laws." Rhonda narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a legal matter. It's an aesthetics matter." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying aesthetics override state law?" "I'm saying," Rhonda said sharply, "that we will not let sentimentalism dictate property value." A screen door creaked. Gwen Peterson, wrapped in a floral robe and wearing scuffed slippers, stepped onto her porch. Her hair was in curlers, but her voice was sharp. "Not again, Rhonda. Every time the weather turns, you try to clean the street of anything with a story." Rhonda turned, flustered. "Gwen, this doesn't concern." "I helped type the original HOA charter," Gwen interrupted. "Back when we used typewriters and the rules fit on one page. You've turned it into a novella nobody asked for." Rhonda opened her mouth, but before she could fire back, the low hum of an approaching engine cut through the tension. Billy's Camaro pulled up smooth and confident, glinting under the morning sun. He stepped out with a phone already in hand. "Smile, Rhonda. This one's for posterity." "I will have your camera confiscated," she snapped. Billy smiled. "Then you'll have to explain why." Rick took a long step back from the tow hitch. "Yeah, I'm gonna need a police presence and signed waiver before I touch this. I'm not dragging a vet's truck down the street just so it can be a footnote in some neighborhood newsletter." Ellie walked to the mailbox post and knelt. From her bag, she pulled a clear plastic sleeve and slid inside a letter-size sign laminated with care. She tacked it to the wooden frame beside the truck. "Vehicle under state historic protection, do not disturb." The wind fluttered it gently, but the message stood firm. Rick offered a small nod. "Good day, ma'am," he said, before returning to his cab and reversing out, slow and respectful. Rhonda stood still, lips trembling, then turned sharply on her heel and marched back toward the HOA office, her clipboard bouncing with each angry step. Billy walked up beside Ellie. "Well," he said, "she's gonna double the next HOA dues out of spite." Ellie exhaled. "Let her try. We've got sunlight, cameras, and statute." Later that day, Gwen's rocking chair creaked steadily as she watched from her porch. A couple of neighbors walked by, nodding politely but saying little. By mid-afternoon, Ellie spotted a small blurb buried in the corner of the Briar Glen Weekly. "Veterans Plate Spurs Debate Over HOA Authority." By staff writer. No byline. No quote. But it was a start. That evening, just as twilight brushed the rooftops with orange and shadow, Ellie returned from checking the mail. No bills, a grocery flyer, and one yellowed envelope, blank. She frowned and unlocked the door. Moments later, the flap whispered on the tile floor. A manila envelope slid under Ellie's door that evening, labeled, "You didn't get this from me." At 6:45 a.m., Ellie hears the unmistakable rattle of a tow truck pulling up to her curb. The sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, metal shifting over gravel, the click of hydraulic brakes engaging, a muffled cough of the diesel engine. Ellie shot upright from her breakfast table, toast untouched, coffee half cold in its mug. She moved fast, slipping into her sneakers and grabbing the manila folder she'd left by the front door. Out on the porch, the air was thick with early May humidity, clinging to her skin like invisible gauze. The truck sat angled just past her mailbox, its long flatbed tilted ever so slightly. A man in a safety vest, mid-40s with sun-leathered skin, unhooked a winch. "Morning," Ellie called calmly. He glanced up. "Ma'am." HOA requested removal of the vehicle. Said it's non-compliant. Ellie stepped down the front steps, holding out the letter. "Before you do anything, you might want to read this. It's from the governor's legal aid. The vehicle is protected under Arkansas Code 27-24-201, and this," she tapped the paper, "is a Purple Heart plate." The driver, whose jacket read Rick, took the page and read. His brow furrowed. From behind them, heels clacked down the sidewalk. Rhonda Kingsley arrived in full makeup and a collared magenta shirt, her HOA badge clipped to her belt like a sheriff's star. "Mr. Dawson," she called, addressing Rick. "You don't need to read that. It's irrelevant. We operate under private community standards, not state suggestions." Rick held up a hand. "My brother served in Iraq. Got shrapnel in his leg from a roadside bomb. He doesn't like suggestions either, but he loves laws." Rhonda narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a legal matter. It's an aesthetics matter." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying aesthetics override state law?" "I'm saying," Rhonda said sharply, "that we will not let sentimentalism dictate property value." A screen door creaked. Gwen Peterson, wrapped in a floral robe and wearing scuffed slippers, stepped onto her porch. Her hair was in curlers, but her voice was sharp. "Not again, Rhonda. Every time the weather turns, you try to clean the street of anything with a story." Rhonda turned, flustered. "Gwen, this doesn't concern." "I helped type the original HOA charter," Gwen interrupted. "Back when we used typewriters and the rules fit on one page. You've turned it into a novella nobody asked for." Rhonda opened her mouth, but before she could fire back, the low hum of an approaching engine cut through the tension. Billy's Camaro pulled up smooth and confident, glinting under the morning sun. He stepped out with a phone already in hand. "Smile, Rhonda. This one's for posterity." "I will have your camera confiscated," she snapped. Billy smiled. "Then you'll have to explain why." Rick took a long step back from the tow hitch. "Yeah, I'm gonna need a police presence and signed waiver before I touch this. I'm not dragging a vet's truck down the street just so it can be a footnote in some neighborhood newsletter." Ellie walked to the mailbox post and knelt. From her bag, she pulled a clear plastic sleeve and slid inside a letter-size sign laminated with care. She tacked it to the wooden frame beside the truck. "Vehicle under state historic protection, do not disturb." The wind fluttered it gently, but the message stood firm. Rick offered a small nod. "Good day, ma'am," he said, before returning to his cab and reversing out, slow and respectful. Rhonda stood still, lips trembling, then turned sharply on her heel and marched back toward the HOA office, her clipboard bouncing with each angry step. Billy walked up beside Ellie. "Well," he said, "she's gonna double the next HOA dues out of spite." Ellie exhaled. "Let her try. We've got sunlight, cameras, and statute." Later that day, Gwen's rocking chair creaked steadily as she watched from her porch. A couple of neighbors walked by, nodding politely but saying little. By mid-afternoon, Ellie spotted a small blurb buried in the corner of the Briar Glen Weekly. "Veterans Plate Spurs Debate Over HOA Authority." By staff writer. No byline. No quote. But it was a start. That evening, just as twilight brushed the rooftops with orange and shadow, Ellie returned from checking the mail. No bills, a grocery flyer, and one yellowed envelope, blank. She frowned and unlocked the door. Moments later, the flap whispered on the tile floor. A manila envelope slid under Ellie's door that evening, labeled, "You didn't get this from me." They rocked in silence for a minute, the faint sound of wind chimes tapping above them. Ellie sipped the tea, then leaned forward. "I haven't touched it since, before." "You might want to take a look," Gwen said, not unkindly. "Before Rhonda makes a case for towing it. She's itching to flex her new title." Ellie stood. "Thanks for the tea." Back in the driveway, she pulled open the heavy driver's side door. It groaned but didn't resist. The interior smelled faintly of dust, vinyl, and citrus cleaner. The bench seat was faded, cracked in places, but intact. A pair of sunglasses still sat on the dash, lenses fogged. She reached into the glove compartment. Old registration slips, a pair of gloves, and a folded square of napkin fell into her palm. The ink was smudged, but still legible. Memorial Day 1986, never forget who we drove for. Her breath caught for just a second. That was the year he'd returned from the dedication at Fort Hood, wearing his old uniform, boots spit-shined, truck washed by hand. She remembered sitting beside him, legs swinging, as he waved to passing veterans. She unfolded the napkin fully, careful not to tear the worn paper, and tucked it into the breast pocket of her scrub top. Her father had always insisted the truck stay visible on Memorial Day weekend, no matter what the HOA said. Inside the house, she retrieved the latest HOA bulletin from the counter. A new rule had been added to Section 4.5.3, unsightly or aged vehicles, defined as those exhibiting visible corrosion, body damage, or inconsistent paint, must be removed from community property, including private driveways. Passed by a 3-2 vote. Ellie scanned the bottom. Rhonda Kingsley had presided. Of course she had. She moved to the porch, sinking into the rocker Gwen had helped her refurbish last fall. It creaked as it shifted beneath her. She sipped the last of her tea, pulled her phone from her pocket, and opened the voice recorder. Note, HOA rule amended. Truck targeted. Need to check exemption policies. She ended the note and looked across the street. Gwen waved once, then disappeared inside, her porch light flicking on automatically. Ellie rocked forward and stood. The sky was fading toward indigo, the air cooler now. She returned to the truck, her fingers grazing the hood. She crouched beside the license plate, brushing away a thin film of pollen. Her eyes froze. The plate, faded and scratched, still read clear, PH 7642. Purple Heart designation. She stood slowly, her gaze locked on those numbers. Ellie looks at the truck's weathered license plate and freezes. It reads, PH 7642, a Purple Heart veteran plate. The envelope contains a printed thread of emails between Rhonda and the HOA treasurer. Don't worry, I'll recode the landscaping invoices. Ellie read the line again, then again. The printout was grainy, as if someone had scanned it from an old fax machine, but the words were unmistakable. The date in the corner read March 12. The sender, Rhonda Kingsley. The recipient, Stephen L. Platt, HOA treasurer. Another message, further down the page, caught her breath short. I'll bury it under general maintenance, just mark it as seasonal trimming. No one checks that line anyway. Ellie lowered the papers slowly onto the kitchen table. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, a soft thread of spring rain curling in the breeze. She didn't move for a while, only sat in her chair with a cooling mug of tea, watching a drip work its way down the windowpane. She remembered what Gwen had said weeks ago, almost in passing, about how fines would appear and vanish, how the HOA budget never seemed to balance. She reached for her phone. Billy opened the garage door with one hand and held a can of cola in the other. Back again, he said, surprised but smiling. You're either addicted to brake cleaner or about to start your own shop. Ellie held out the pages. I think I just found the crack in the dam. He whistled low after skimming the first 2 pages. She really wrote this stuff down. Amateur hour. They thought no one would ever look, Ellie said. I need more. Anything public. Expense reports, company filings, contractor names. Billy walked over to a cluttered workbench, moved a stack of manuals, and pulled out a cardboard shoebox labeled Dad's Stuff. Inside was an old manila envelope marked Briar Glen Committee Minutes, Archive. He grinned. My dad never threw anything away. 2 hours later, with Gwen joining them at the kitchen table, they'd uncovered a small trove, photocopies of budget reports, committee memos, handwritten board notes from the mid-2000s. Gwen flipped through one with a frown. This entry says, tree canopy clearance, cost listed at $3,200. But I remember that year. No one trimmed a thing. We had branches scraping the Peterson fence until Halloween. Same company Rhonda's husband runs, Billy added, pointing. Double initials, same address. They stared at each other in silence, the weight of it slowly settling. I want to speak to someone, Ellie finally said. Someone outside this whole tangle. You should talk to Erin March, Gwen said gently. She used to write for the Arkansas Chronicle. Quit after the buyout, but she still pokes around. She won't be biased? Ellie asked. Gwen smiled sadly. She got fined for painting her door periwinkle in '09. She'll listen. Ellie reached out that evening, sending an encrypted message to the email address Gwen had scribbled on a post-it, marchreporting@gmail.com. An hour later, her phone lit up with a reply, meet me at Porchlight. Booth in the back. No names on record. The diner was quieter at night. The lights were dimmer, the tables half filled with couples picking at pie and workers shaking off their shifts. Ellie slid into the booth, placing a flash drive between the salt and pepper shakers. Erin March looked older than Ellie expected, graying hair in a practical twist, a denim jacket with ink stains near the cuff. Her eyes, though, were sharp. Ellie didn't offer backstory or excuses. She simply nudged the flash drive forward. I'm not looking for headlines, she said. Just sunlight. Erin picked it up. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. You know who said that? Ellie shook her head. Justice Brandeis. Supreme Court. She pocketed the drive. I'll verify everything. You'll hear from me. On her porch that night, Ellie lit a citronella candle and watched the soft flame flicker. Mosquitoes hovered but didn't dare land. Gwen's cherry cobbler dish still sat on the railing, clean and empty, waiting to be returned. From the quiet across the street came the creak of Gwen's rocker, slow and steady. Ellie leaned back, the scent of lemon and candle wax curling into the humid air. She glanced toward the truck. The laminated sign still held strong, and behind it, the plate glimmered faintly in the porch light. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered, heart steady. Miss Harper. The voice was official but warm. This is Secretary Langston with the governor's office. I wanted to inform you he's confirmed to attend your Memorial Day parade. The governor's office calls again, he's confirmed to attend your Memorial Day parade. Ellie watches from her porch as folding chairs appear on front lawns and children run with paper flags. The street was still slick with morning dew, but already laughter echoed between driveways. Neighbors in denim jackets and faded ball caps unfolded aluminum chairs and passed out thermoses of sweet coffee. Dogs barked in the distance. Someone tied red, white, and blue streamers around a mailbox, and a girl no older than 7 waved a handmade flag fashioned from popsicle sticks and glitter. Ellie stood quietly on her porch, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. The air smelled of sun-warmed grass and bacon grease drifting from open kitchen windows. Inside the truck, she had placed the photo just minutes earlier, a sun-bleached snapshot of her father in his uniform, smiling through a windshield smudged with thumbprints. A ribbon flag decal still clung to the corner of the dash. She adjusted the frame one last time. Across the street, Gwen emerged wearing a navy blouse with pressed slacks and a pin on her lapel. She held it delicately, as if lifting memory itself. My husband wore this to every parade we ever attended, she said softly, handing it to Ellie. It belongs near the front today. Ellie fastened it to the truck's visor clip, her fingers trembling only slightly. By 10 o'clock, the main road of Briar Glen was lined with lawn chairs and eager faces. The marching band, slightly off-key but marching in perfect unison, led the parade forward with a brassy rendition of Stars and Stripes Forever. A veterans' motorcycle group followed behind, flags snapping in the breeze. A temporary podium stood at the edge of the square, draped in bunting and guarded by ferns in plastic pots. Governor Tom Beasley stepped up to the microphone, wearing a tan suit with a striped tie and a faint smile that suggested he'd already shaken too many hands before lunch. My friends, he began, this morning we celebrate more than tradition, we honor legacy. Applause rippled, and Ellie watched as he scanned the crowd. Then, mid-sentence, he paused. His eyes caught on the truck. He stepped away from the mic, drawing a breath, and walked toward the curb. The crowd parted instinctively. Cameras lowered. For a moment, there was only the wind and the creak of Gwen's rocker shifting behind Ellie. Governor Beasley approached the truck, placed his hand gently on the fender, and said, "This is not rust, it's memory sealed in metal." People murmured, stilled. He turned to face the crowd again, raising his voice slightly. "The state of Arkansas recognizes vehicles like this not as clutter, but as testimony. And any association that punishes memory rather than preserves it has no place in shaping our communities." He returned to the podium and added, "Effective immediately, I've ordered a freeze on all discretionary HOA enforcement funding statewide, pending ethics reviews. Let accountability be our tradition." Gasps scattered through the crowd, followed by applause, uncertain at first, then rising, gathering like a summer wind. A moment later, a silver sedan screeched to a stop behind the last row of chairs. Rhonda Kingsley stepped out in heels too sharp for gravel, her eyes darting across the assembled audience. She moved toward the podium but stopped when a wall of neighbors instinctively edged forward, not touching, not blocking, simply standing. Eyes held hers, unblinking. Gwen stood among them. Rhonda's mouth opened. Then shut. She turned and walked back to her car. The parade resumed, more confident now. Ellie felt her knees quiver as she climbed into the truck's driver's seat. Billy walked beside the vehicle as it rolled slowly onto the street, flag fluttering from its mount, the photo of James Harper visible through the windshield. Children waved as they passed, and Ellie spotted Gwen blinking too quickly, her fingers pressed to her lips. As the final notes of the band echoed into the town square, Ellie parked the truck in front of the courthouse lawn. Billy caught up to her, his hands in his pockets, a grin playing at the corner of his mouth. "Don't hate me," he said, "but I pulled this from Rhonda's laptop backups." He slipped Ellie a flash drive with a crooked grin. "I pulled it from Rhonda's laptop backups." Ellie opens the flash drive while the last notes of the parade band echo down the street. The brass had faded, but its aftertaste lingered, bright, unpolished, real. Ellie sat on the edge of her couch, laptop balanced on a tray, windows open to the breeze still carrying the scent of grilled hot dogs and warm pavement. She slid the flash drive into the side port with a small click. Folders bloomed across the screen. She opened one labeled HOA Docs Invoices 2022 to 2023, then another titled Meeting Minutes Drafts, and then, there it was, private_memo_remove_harper.pdf. Her breath hitched. She clicked. Suggest motion at April session to penalize Harper's property on aesthetics grounds. Timeline, prior to Memorial Day to avoid optics risk. Final language TBD. She scrolled. Another email, dated 2 weeks earlier than Rhonda's public vote, outlined a plan to shift landscaping funds into board enrichment and reclassify them as administrative training. Billy, sitting cross-legged on her floor with a box of kettle corn between them, leaned closer. She was double-billing mulch. Who even does that? Ellie smirked grimly. Apparently someone who thinks everyone else stops reading after the second paragraph. They worked in tandem for an hour, copying files, organizing documents, extracting timestamps. Billy connected an external hard drive and backed up the folder in triplicate. When they hit a snag on a password-protected memo, Ellie handed him a peach soda and said, "Pretend it's a lock you really want to pick." It opened 20 minutes later. That evening, Gwen arrived wearing a linen shawl and carrying a small notepad. Mildred Hall walked quietly behind her, eyes tired but resolute. They sat together on Ellie's porch, feet brushing against the welcome mat, while crickets warmed up in the hedges. "We write this the old way," Gwen said, tapping her pen. "Plain words. No venom." Together, they drafted a letter, 2 paragraphs long. It outlined what they'd found, how long it had gone unseen, and why the neighborhood deserved better. "We're not here to burn bridges," Ellie added softly, "just to turn on the lights." She printed 25 copies on her home printer, stapled them to handwritten notes that read, "In memory of James Harper," and every voice that didn't know how to yell. Each. Then she added a slice of peach cobbler to each foil tray, made from Gwen's recipe, and began delivering them door to door. Some neighbors blinked in surprise. Some just nodded. One old man down the block clutched her hand and whispered, "Took guts, girl." By twilight, the truck was bathed in gold. Gwen stood beside it, folding the American flag she'd flown since dawn. Each crease was precise, slow, final. Mildred's resignation letter hit the community bulletin board before dusk. It was short. Honest. She named names. Cited the fake meetings. Apologized. The final knock came just as Ellie lit the porch light. A county sedan pulled up, marked with a blue and white seal. A man in a crisp shirt and tan slacks stepped out, a leather folder in hand. "Miss Kingsley?" he asked, stopping short on the sidewalk. Rhonda opened her front door with a forced smile, until she saw the seal. Until she saw the reporter from the Briar Glen Weekly standing beside him, notebook open. Mr. Lanier cleared his throat. "This is a subpoena regarding potential ethics violations and misuse of HOA funds." She said nothing. No one did. On her own driveway, Ellie watched quietly as it unfolded. She didn't move, didn't smirk, didn't flinch. The community didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stood. That night, Ellie placed the flag on the mantel and sat with a mug of mint tea. Her feet ached, and her shoulders drooped, but her chest was still. She stepped out to check the mailbox one last time. Inside, a small envelope, no stamp, no name. She unfolded the paper. "Your father would be proud. TB." She smiled, tucked it into the worn family Bible on the hallway shelf, and closed the door behind her. The new HOA board gathers for their first meeting, held on folding chairs in Ellie's yard. The sun had just begun to soften above the rooftops, its early June warmth clinging to the breeze without smothering it. Ellie moved between rows of metal chairs spaced neatly under the sycamore tree, a pitcher of lemonade balanced in one hand, paper cups tucked under her arm. Gwen sat with her knitting bag beside her, the yarn untouched, eyes scanning the faces trickling in. Billy stood near the gate, helping a neighbor park their walker. He wore a clean denim shirt and had brought his socket wrench set, just in case the chairs got fussy, he joked. Mildred Hall called the gathering to order by tapping her knuckles lightly on the folding table. "No gavels," she smiled. "They echo too harshly in places still healing." There were no bylaws read aloud, no stern memos. Just neighbors, lemonade, and the slow rustle of leaf shadows. Ellie looked around at the familiar faces, Mr. Singh with his straw hat and suspenders, then Gwen setting out a covered dish, Gwen passing around small slips of history, photocopies of old parades and flower shows from the 1980s. "If I ever run a meeting," Ellie whispered to Gwen, "it'll have lemonade and common sense." Gwen winked. "You said it. And now you've done it." Later that week, Ellie stood beside the town square's north edge, where a half-moon of fresh soil outlined what would soon become the Veterans Tribute Garden. Children dug shallow trenches for marigolds while teenagers helped lift stones into place for the central walkway. The truck stood just beyond, cleaned but never polished, its rust catching the sun like veins of copper. A brass plaque sat waiting at the base of its display stand. The letters read, "In memory of James Harper and those who carried our burdens home." The governor's office had sent a letter. It arrived on thick paper, the seal embossed at the top, and had been read aloud at the last town meeting by Mildred. In it, the representative wrote, "We commend the residents of Briar Glen for preserving the stories that shape our shared legacy. Let this garden be a place of reflection and gratitude." Rhonda's name had vanished from every HOA ledger. Officially resigned. No ceremony. No speech. Just a box dropped off at the community center labeled Files. Final. Gwen, now titled community historian, carried a leather-bound notebook everywhere. To write things down properly this time, she'd said. Billy leaned under the truck's hood for the last time that morning, whistling as he checked the oil. "She'll run just fine for one last lap." Ellie smiled, tracing a fingertip along the truck's fender. That afternoon, the tribute ceremony unfolded like a lullaby. Neighbors gathered around folding chairs and picnic blankets. A quartet of high school musicians played softly, off-key but earnest. Ellie stepped forward, the flag folded under her arm. She spoke into the wind more than the mic. "This truck didn't fight wars," she said, voice steady. It carried those who did. And that's worth protecting. No applause followed. Only nods. The kind that came not from agreement but understanding. As the sky dimmed, Billy guided the truck down the new garden loop. Ellie rode in the passenger seat, the window rolled halfway, the folded flag in her lap. When they completed the circle, the truck parked for the last time beneath a canopy of string lights, tiny warm bulbs that blinked like lazy fireflies. By nightfall, the crowd had thinned. Ellie remained on her porch in a lawn chair, the same one her father used to mend every fall. The flag sat across her knees, the fabric still holding faint scent of cedar from the attic. She looked toward the truck, now framed under light and shadow, wrapped in peace. She whispered, "We stayed the course, Dad. We stayed the course, Dad." On a quiet June evening, folding chairs in the grass and a truck framed in soft lights told the story of a town that chose memory over convenience. What began as a silent note on a windshield became a chorus of neighbors who remembered what decency, and decency's defense, looked like. When rules are used for good, communities thrive. When they're misused, they crumble beneath the weight of silence. Perhaps the real power wasn't in the plaque or the parade, but in how a single voice, steady and kind, can remind others to listen again. And in that stillness, beneath the marigolds and the flag, the truck stayed.